Hello everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all. And today we are going to be talking about the other as a mirror, thoughts on projection and transference. Okay, so I'll just start with the PowerPoint, and then we are going to have a discussion in the last 30 minutes. Let's see if I can share with you. Sharing is not turned. Can I go ahead? All right. It's just okay. Is everybody able to see? Is that okay? Yeah. All right. So today we are going to be talking the other as a mirror. We are going to be talking about projection and transference and exploring the concepts of projection and transference and examining their role in the analytic relationship and the path towards individuation, right? So, well, this is Sigmund Freud, a little upset in the picture, but it was I was able to get in the internet. So, something that it's very important for us to talk about is that we are going to be seeing a little bit of Freud's view on transference and Jung's view, okay? But it's very important to understand that Jung's idea of transference within the analytical relationship was similar to Freud's, actually, okay? But with some important differences based on Jung's view on the psyche. We have been studying a lot of the psyche here and about the collective unconscious, the libido, and all of that. So, and please, people who have not listened to these topics, just go to the Burnmouth Society and get there in the YouTube, our previous meetings, okay? It's all there. So the thing is that Jung agrees with Freud, actually, that the phenomena of transference consists of thoughts, feelings, and fantasies from another relationship, typically from the past, being re-experienced in a current relationship. However, he disagrees with Freud, considering that transference can be based not only on material from the personal unconscious, that we know, we have discussed this previously, that for Freud, talking about the unconscious, there would be only the personal unconscious, okay? He didn't agree with the concept of the collective unconscious. So, so for Jung, right? Sorry, for Freud, Freud was based on the transference that only in the material coming only from the personal unconscious. But for Jung, the transferred can be also with material from the archetypal dimension of the psyche that we call the transpersonal dimension of the psyche. So one might experience a paternal transference, for instance, to an analyst that goes beyond anything that the patient has ever experienced with their father, for instance, right? Perceiving the analyst as the ultimate figure, perhaps even a mythically idealized one, which is more appropriately termed archetypal transference. Okay, so Freud never talks about the archetypes or the collective unconscious. He's agreed actually with Jung about having this depths in the unconscious. Although Freud and Jung share the view that transference is an ever-present element in every relationship, for Freud, transference and its analytical counterpart, that is countertransference, was a highly pathological occurrence among people and was inappropriate, irrational, and reality deprived orientation. Okay, so therefore, Freud viewed transference within the analytical relationship as a matter for constant and determined investigation between analyst and patient, until ideally the entirety of the transference had become conscious, been worked through, and finally resolved. Okay, this is because for Freud, as we know, the transference phenomenon was a projection of infantile and repressed contents, remember, from the personal unconscious onto the person of the analyst, and thus producing the so-called transference neurosis. That's why when we are in a psychoanalytic session, a Freudian session of psychoanalysis, the analyst will do a lot of transference interpretations, right? I say this and that, and I show some emotions concerning a certain behavior, and then the analyst, oh, well, you told me that when you were little, in a similar situation, you felt like this towards your mother or towards your father. So this would be roughly, okay, a very common example of transference interpretation. And of course, sometimes we need to do that in Jungian analysis, but we need a different approach if we are talking about the collective unconscious, right? And about archetypal material coming from there. Remember, everyone, that on the core of a complex, our mother complex, our father complex, there is an archetype, the archetype of the mother, the archetype of the father, that all of us share in any culture, any time of human development, at any level of education, it doesn't matter, all of us share this heritage of the archetypes, okay? And so it was necessary it is necessary for dealing with the transpersonal and archetypal contents to understand transference in another type of way, I mean, in a deeper way, okay? So it's just a summary here in the slide, what we have been talking, that for Freud's view on transference, that he considered transference and countertransference as highly pathological, marked by irrationality and detachment from reality. He believed transference in analysis required constant scrutiny until it was fully conscious and resolved. Freud aimed for complete resolution of transference, unlike Jung's approach of understanding and integration. All right? So, of course, it was by chance that this image of Jung is when Jung was young. but we can think that that he brought to psychology, to the understanding of our unconscious, this new and deeper understanding, right? So, Jung's emphasis was he believed the genuine relationship between analyst and patient held greater healing potential than the transference relationship, right? Um, he advocated for tolerating, understanding, but not necessarily resolving transference of personal or archetypal material. And Jung saw resolving transference at the personal level as insufficient, aiming for integration of deeper collective experiences. Okay. So I'll just go back a little bit to tell you that Jung, however, if we are comparing with Freud, he viewed the psyche as we know as a phenomenon of natural occurrences. So he removed transference and countertransference from the realm of psychopathology, seeing it as a natural occurrence, perhaps inevitable, and sometimes even useful. For these reasons, he diverged strongly from psychoanalysis, advocating the viewpoint that the true relationship between analyst and patient was potentially much more healing than the transference relationship. Jung considered the transference of personal or archetypal material onto the person of the analyst as something essentially to be tolerated, but certainly not promoted. We must say that. Something to be understood, but not necessarily resolved. Thus, in Jungian analysis, the transference and countertransference relationship is often recognized and examined without being, however, the sole focus of treatment. In fact, as we can see in light of Jungian theory of the collective unconscious, the resolution of transference could mean bringing to consciousness the vast ocean of collective human experience, a manifest impossibility, at least in our evolution at the moment of our consciousness, right? So Jung worked to make conscious the totality that represents the unconscious relationship of transference and countertransference, thus hoping to bring the consciousness, the deep levels of existence that the patient experiences and re-experiences in the analytical relationship. So these are some sentences by Jung, okay? In 1935, I think it's in the Tavistock conferences in London, he said, transference, strictly, as I have already said, is a projection which happens between two individuals and which, as a rule, is of an emotional and compulsory nature. Strictly speaking, transference is the projection of unconscious contents upon the person analyzing the unconscious. The term transference, however, is used in a much wider sense and embraces all the exceedingly complex processes which bind the patient to the analyst. Okay, so transference is a kind of projection. It is a projection, actually, of unconscious contents upon the person of the analyst, right? Or the person who is analyzing the unconscious, okay? But as Jung says, it embraces all the exceedingly complex process which make this relationship happen, okay? And this is in 1935. Then in 1946, after the Second World War, then he wrote a more definite approach because Jung was always going back and forth his opinions, okay, and going further, exploring further. So in the beginning, he was kind of upset with transference because it was pretty much a concept of psychoanalysis, and he wanted, not paying much attention to it or to this phenomena, but he went further. And let's see what he says in 1946. He says the transference phenomenon is without doubt one of the most important syndromes in the process of individuation. Its wealth of meanings goes far beyond mere personal likes and dislikes. By virtue of its collective contents and symbols, it transcends the individual personality and extends into the social sphere, reminding us of those higher human relationships which are so painfully absent in our present social order, or rather disorder. So this wonderful sentence, I think, was right after the Second World War. Unfortunately, it's so up to date, let's say, right? So remember, people, that he was going always deeper in the collective unconscious, right? So it is a little different what he says in 1935 than what he says in like 11 years later after the Second World War, right? Because he then sees the importance of this phenomena of transference, but also connecting with the complexity of human relationships. And we are studying the relational world, right? And reminding us, he says, of those higher human relationships, which are so painfully absent in our present social order. Okay. So among Jungian analysts, there is a greater, oh no, a little bit, let's go a little bit more on the Jung's perspective of transference. So I've put here for people that want to take a look, because this beginning of our meeting is based on the guide to the complete work of C.G. Jung by Robert Hopkins. It's nice for people that are not a specialist can go there, and it's very quick to and very clear some of the main concepts. So we are talking about similarities with Freud. For instance, Jung agreed with Freud that transference involves re-experiencing past relationship dynamics in the present, especially with when we are analyzing the unconscious. But there are key differences. For instance, Jung believed transference could stem from both personal and archetypal unconscious material, leading to archetypal transference that transcends personal experience, okay? And also, we have he would think as a natural occurrence. Just, sorry, I'll just go back. So, unlike Freud, Jung viewed transference as a natural and helpful aspect of the relation, not and not only solely pathological. So, To explain his transformational view on the transference and countertransference relationship in analysis, Jung used the symbolism of the alchemical process. It's very beautiful, this part of Jung's theory. A process of transforming common, non-precious metals into gold, which medieval alchemists believed to be literally possible. We are talking about the Middle Ages, right? But which Jung saw as a projection of the inner psychic process onto the external material reality. So all alchemy at that point, in this thought that for us would be fantasy, for instance, for the modern, postmodern man, um, of transforming common non-precious metals into gold that we know it's not possible. The medieval alchemists believed that, but Jung saw as all this, the readings and the text of the alchemy that in medieval times that talk about that as a projection of the medieval man, of the inner psychic process onto the external material reality. The most important point of the analytical process for Jung was to transform the common metals of unexamined, projected projected experience into the gold of more unified, personally integrated experience, and not merely to resolve transference at the level of the personal unconscious, okay? To resolve transference at the level of personal unconscious was Freud's point of view. So Jung thought that all of us, our souls, our psyche, search this gold within us that we could, it's a metaphor, for instance, for the light within us, like in St. Luke's gospel, let the light shine within you, right? So we know we are sparkles of the creation, and the creation is, we all also use a metaphor as the light that creates everything. So the light is within us. And how come in medieval times that we say the Black Age or whatever ages, right? Where was this information? This information was in the collective unconscious. We just didn't have, as the medieval man didn't have yet a way to translate all this symbolism, all this knowledge, actually, that was in the collective unconscious, actually that is in the collective unconscious. Now we have the depth psychology, for instance, Jung psychology and spiritist psychology, also with Jonah DeAngelis and other authors, to think about that, to connect ourselves with that. But in medieval times, they had the intuition and the dreams and the symbolism that the so precious metals, they knew that they need metals, for instance, for swords, for um, cannons and whatever, for war, of course, also for other instruments that we need for the daily life. But the most valuable has always been gold. So they wanted to transform the common metal into gold. And this is a metaphor for our inner transformation, right? So for Jung, the most important point of the analytical process was to transform the common metals of unexamined, projected experience into the gold of a more unified personality, a more integrated, personality. the definitive and highly influential study of alchemical symbolism as a pertinent to transference within analysis, that analysis that we call his book, The Psychology of Transference. And I will show you to you. It's in the left of the image, C.G. Jung's The Psychology of the Transference, his book, which is with its richness of symbols and engravings, its beautiful images from medieval times, could not be more different from the typically Freudian psychoanalytic treatment of this theme. Okay? So a definitive study, the Jung's Psychology of the Transference from 1946. In this study, Jung's work on transference, rich in alchemical symbolism, contrasts sharply with Freudian approaches. It delves into the symbolic and archetypal dimension of the transference phenomenon. And this work has significantly influenced the understanding and handling of transference within Jungian analysis. Okay? So before we come here, among Jungian analysts, I think there are a lot of people watching these meetings that are in England, all right? So among Jungian analysts, there is a great diversity of opinions on the place of transference and countertransference in analysis. Some analysts make the analysis of transference the central piece of analytical work, especially the so-called London Jungian School, okay, which follows the guidance of Michael Fordham, while others more closely follow Jung's own opinions and relativize the place of transference analysis in psychotherapy. Well, now I brought to you another author that talks about the analytical encounter, transference, and human relationship. Okay, it's Mario Jacobi, I think it's the name. And his work explores the complexities of transference and its impact on human relationships within the analytical setting. And he talks about a very nice case example that I brought to you. Okay, so this case is like this: a 23-year-old woman, extremely inhibited, brought the following initial dream after the first analytical session. I am in a house. There is an old man who wants to kill me, and he cuts my arteries. I scream for help, and I try to bandage the wounds myself. Then I manage to escape and look for a doctor. The man follows me. In the end, I am with a doctor who bandages the wounds. Okay? From her associations, Mario is going to say, it became clear that this murderous pursuer represented an attitude she had experienced from her mother, which became destructively effective and powerful within herself. Remember, people, we talked about dreams and all the symbolism in the dreams, the images, right? Even of the people that we know concerns the person, the dreamer, right? They are images and they are issues from the person's unconscious, right? So she had this difficult relationship with her mother. And the relationship and all the experience with the mother complex, right, became destructively effective and powerful within herself, became her mother complex. According to her description, her mother was a domineering woman and a fervent Catholic who had tried early on to convey to her children that a correct life meant praying and fulfilling obligations. She suffered from a heart condition, the mother, of nervous origin, and used this condition as a source of power. If her children or husband resisted, she would become ill, and feelings of guilt would constellate in them, would appear in them. Okay? So this is just a summary, the maternal influence and the internalized conflict. So the mother figure, through associations, we understand that the murderous pursuer in the dream is revealed to represent an internalized destructive attitude stemming from the patient's mother. The mother is described as domineering and devotedly Catholic, instilling in her children the belief that a righteous life meant prayer and fulfilling obligations. And the mother suffered from a nervous heart condition, wielding it as a source of power. Resistance from her children or husband would trigger her illness, inducing guilt in them. So that was the way that the mother controlled them. And the patient's response, she started exhibiting symptoms of a troubled primary relationship and a lack of primary trust. And well, let's see a little more about that. Okay. So the patient was depressed and exhibits many of these symptoms that we are talking about that arise from a troubled primary relationship and a lack of primary trust, because the child-mother relationship is the first relationship that the baby experiences in this life. Even if the father tries to become very present, but the mother is delivering, is having the baby in pregnancy in the womb, and gives birth to the baby, breastfeeds, and all of that. So the primary trust starts there for the baby, for the ego, okay? So her behavior towards her mother was from an early age rebellious, essentially healthy, because she was supposed to rebel, let's say. The mother was very domineering. But her rebellion was invariably followed by feelings of guilt and remorse. She then had to apologize to her mother, who forgave her generously. So the mother, of course, had a secondary gain, we say, right? With her, let's say, heart condition. So the rebellion was a sin, was seen as a sin that had to be forgiven by the mother and then by the confessor in church, by the priest. The patient could not see the utmost importance of her rebellious impulses and thus could not trust her feelings. She became increasingly disconnected from her own nature and increasingly dependent on her mother. The child of a mother actually suffering from a narcissistic disorder that this mother also, we could say she suffered, must live from an early age with the following paradox, let's say. I am myself only if I fulfill my mother's expectations of me. If otherwise I am as I feel, then I'm not myself. That's very difficult for the child. So the unconscious feeling of the patient that she did not have the right to live her life according to her own nature was expressed in her initial dream through the cutting of the arteries. In terms of the Jungian model, the old murderer would represent the negative animus. Remember, we saw about the animus and anima, right, as complexes when they are connected in a let's say primitive way with the dynamics of the unconscious, but they are also archetypes, okay? Because they are the feminine and masculine forces of the spirit. Remember, we had a wonderful meeting about that. So the old murderer would represent the negative animus of the mother, now internalized. After the first session, it seemed that she thought the therapist had adequately treated her wound. Soon, a very intense and complex transference developed. So she had another dream, okay? One day she brought a dream in which the analyst gave her a Jung's book about the divine child. So we have also had a great meeting about the inner child, where we talked about the archetype of the divine child. So the analyst then in that session actually arises, from the chair and picks up a book, this book, Jung's book of the divine child, that is Introduction to a Science of Mythology, the myth of the divine child and the mysteries of the Elysius. It's a beautiful book. Okay. The analyst then actually gives her the book. In the next session, she apologizes for not having been able to read the book, which she hated. Okay. So she rejects the book in the next session, and she apologized deeply for not reading the book and expressing her dislike for it. So you can understand she doesn't do what the analyst suggests, and then she apologizes. Remember what she's repeating, right? So in the initial dream, the old man follows her to the doctor's office. Remember that? So on one hand, an important process had begun in her unconscious because the negative mother complex, the negative animals, the old man, the murderers, felt as murderers uh, in her unconscious, that animals follows her to the doctor's office. So on one hand, an important process had begun in her unconscious, a process to which the significant symbolism of the divine child referred. The birth of something new, something powerful, something that can lead us to our individuation process. On the other hand, it became evident that she had begun to repeat the pattern of rebellion and forgiveness she had experienced with her mother, right? The analyst was receiving not only the projection of the doctor who helps, that it's inside each one of us, the healer, the archetype of the healer. And we say the wounded healer because we all have our wounds, and it's because of them that the healer get the opposites within us. So if I feel sick, disempowered, if I feel small and sick, I in my consciousness I'm depressed and all, I go and search for an analyst, a treatment, a doctor, whatever my symptoms are. But I'm projecting at this point the healer onto the doctor, onto the therapist and the analyst, because actually only ourselves, only we can heal ourselves. We know that. That's why Joanna calls this kind of study self-discovery. You know, she calls us to this self, to have this courage for self-discovering ourselves. Okay. So on one hand, okay, she takes to the doctor's office the sick part, let's say the primitive animals and the problematic mother complex. Um, on the other hand, it became evident that she had begun to repeat the pattern of rebellion and forgiveness that she had experienced with her mother. So we have the wounded child, for instance, and we have the divine child, the archetype present also. The analyst was receiving not only the projection of the doctor who helps, but also that of the murderous animals. Okay. Allowing herself that rebellion was more important than reading the book, and her behavior was interpreted by the analyst as a repetition of the pattern of rebellion and repair. But her rebellion was healthy, and the analyst told her, and represented her tendency towards independence. Okay. So it's very important, even when I read this case again, the analyst, the author says that it was very spontaneous of him to go, and he had the book in his shelves, and just to grab the book and give to her. But it could be question his attitude, because maybe he could have just talked to her. But by doing that as a suggestion, he also triggered her to be rebellious. So we have to be very attentive to the transference, even in Jungian analysis, that it's going on, but also to the deepest levels of the unconscious that are being represented. We are talking about the divine child. We are talking about the healer. So we are talking about archetypes and the collective unconscious, not only about her mother complex, and the identification with the mother and the animals of the mother, and with the wounded child, her complex of the inner child, but with deeper levels of the psyche. Okay. So in a relationship, we call transference for the author the other as an entirely different subject, practically, and the other practically does not exist. Okay. The other that should be an entirely different subject. So the other person practically doesn't exist as a separate subject. They become an object for our needs, desires, fantasies, and fears, a carrier of our projected psychic reality. So the other person then it's represents all of this. And is experienced as a part of myself and is not a you in their own right. It is this fact that creates most of the problems and difficulties for both partners. There must be some balance between giving and receiving, which means that the reality of the other person as a whole subject must be taken into account. So the transference brings a distortion in the relationship, we could say. But the things that's happening ideally when we are analyzing the psyche, right? So we are together with a person and searching for this analysis of ourselves, our psyche. and with a specialized person, a therapist, an analyst. So what happens is that the other person so is experienced as a part of ourselves, not as a you in their own right, leading to relationship problems. Internal pressures create distortions that violate the other person's existence and wholeness if it goes on. The imbalance between giving and receiving hinders the recognition of the other person's reality as a whole subject. Okay. In a relationship, we call the other person so is experienced like this, and it brings a lot of difficulties. So in transferential relationships, the pressures of internal needs create distortions that do violence actually to the other person's existence and wholeness, even if I don't express exactly, but it's my behavior, it's my we could say my psychic disposition towards the other person. Violence in this sense, okay? Of course, it's unconscious, but I should mature, evolve in my consciousness that what we are trying to do right now, and realize when I'm projecting into onto other people, or especially of course when I am in analysis, many times I'm not going to be able to, but I trust that not only in the person of the analyst of the or the therapist, but I trust in myself. Because for Jungian analysis, the patient is not like, sometimes for in Freud and psychoanalysis, that the psychoanalyst seems to know everything about the other, the unconscious, and keep doing transference interpretations, right? As we talked previously. But actually, Jung didn't believe, even that people in Jungian analysis don't lie on the couch, for instance. We talk, like we are talking now, only not virtually, but nowadays even virtually, but face to face, because we understand that we are both analysts and the patient, and the psychotherapist and the patient. If we are talking about a Jungian perspective, that we are both together trying to analyze, trying to look at the unconscious, and it's so difficult, right? So of course, transference material will happen, and they are supposed to happen. It's okay. It's just to have the courage to look at it together, right? So this dynamic highlights the importance of recognizing and addressing transference in therapeutic and personal relationships. So a close human relationship actually needs to be mutual, to be satisfying for both partners. There must be some balance between giving and receiving, which means that the reality of the other person as a whole subject must be taken into account. In the transferential relationship, the pressures of internal needs creates distortion, and then causing that violence that we were talking about, to the existence of the wholeness of the other person. Okay. So remember, when we are talking about countertransference, we are talking also about the possible projections of the analyst towards the patient. So that's why it's so important for the analyst to undergo analysis himself or herself, and also be always very attentive to countertransference issues, okay? So mutual recognition, when we are talking about now different relationships among people. So a close human relationship requires mutuality for satisfaction. There must be balance between giving and receiving, acknowledging the other person's reality as a whole subject. And this recognition allows for a genuine connection where each individual is seen and valued for their own being rather than as a projection of one's internal world. Okay. So the analyst role, it's just we have already talked. So his interpretations help the patient to understand the meaning of her dreams and behaviors, fostering self-awareness and growth. And here is Jung when he broke up with Freud. He made a lot of mandalas, we know that, and he said, my mandalas were cryptograms concerning the state of the self, which were presented to me anew each day. In them, I saw the self, that is, my whole being. So it's a way to be with ourselves. So if we do that, of course, we are going to project less onto other people our own inner conflicts and difficulties, okay? So Jungian analysis aims to move beyond simply resolving transference, seeking a more integrated and whole experience of self. And the path to individuation, let's not forget that. By understanding and integrating our projections and transferences, we can move towards greater self-awareness and walk towards individuation. Okay, now we have this, what I brought to you, some of what Joanna talks about this subject, transference and projection. In her beautiful book that we have seen a little bit in other meetings, The Psychology of Gratitude. All right. So in Joanna's words, this is, I always bring a kind of a summary for you in the slides so you can be more, we can have a more clear picture. But I'm also going to tell you what she says about the subject. So this presentation explores the profound insights of Joanna de Angelis, of course, psychographed by Divaldo Franco, in The Psychology of Gratitude, delving into the complexities of human behavior, the concept of the shadow, and the transformative power of gratitude. So, in the face of certain decisions, that Joanna says, the conscious being experiences great difficulty in choosing what would be the most correct way, of acting. This is because, Joanna says, the collective unconscious is overloaded with fears, distressing memories, uncontrolled impulses, all the legacy of ancestral primitivism, blending general experiences with personal ones. Such an occurrence is the result of the shadow present in the nature of all creatures, okay? So Joanna says that the collective unconscious is a shared repository of human experience, and that further complicates our decision-making process, influencing both joyful and sorrowful events across the globe. We are going to see more about that. In experiences of joy, Joanna says, as well as sorrow, harmony as well as disorder, social groups can share them due to the collective unconscious, which explain disastrous or fortunate occurrences that happen simultaneously in different parts of the earth. Oh, but there are wars going on, and I'm so happy here in whatever part of the world I am. No, I'm not happy. deep. I can feel happy, let's say, in a conscious way, but I have to understand that I share with all my brothers and sisters all the experiences that our spirit have lived through different lives. And even in this life, we are all connected because, it's here present with us, the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, as Professor Lionel calls it. Okay. So it's so important that we understand that because, of course, I can feel happy and I should feel, I have to search for well-being, but I have also to understand that my happiness depends let's say my spiritual well-being, right? I can be happy in the ego because I'm okay. For instance, I'm doing okay by now, or I'm going to a therapist and I'm much better with myself. That's great. I have to do that. Because of my brothers and sisters, we are going to be seeing more of that in terms of vibration. Because everything that I do, to make myself better, makes the collective better. And everything that I do or that I don't do, let's say, that I'm not able to do, and that makes me feel, bad, makes me feel upset and sorrowful, also makes the collective, in a sense, bad or sorrowful, vibrating, lower vibrations. We will understand at this point, Joanna is talking psychologically in this moment, okay? So it's very important. See that here in slide that it's like a summary. We have shared experiences. So how come from no reason at all, we never had for in many, many years the kind of climate disaster that we had here in my state in Brazil. And thank you again for all the prayers. I put some pictures, and of course say no, Anahy, but it's because the climate is okay. No, it's not only because of that. It's because a lot of people, including all of you that are listening and are here and in this meeting and are listening and studying Joanna and studying spiritist psychology and studying Jung, because we try to emanate when we are praying good vibrations, especially for people that are suffering. And of course, maybe the result I'm not going to see at the same moment, because then when we are in prayer or meditation, the psyche is not connected with time and space, right? We are emanating an information to the collective unconscious, to the cosmic, and to the cosmos, and to our cosmic consciousness, let's say. We are trying to connect with cosmic consciousness. So, of course, the result is going to come in due time, in the time of the spirit, and not in the time of the ego, okay? So the collective unconscious allows us to share experiences, both positive and negative, explaining simultaneous occurrences of joy or disaster in different parts of the world. So while we have war in the world, we have to pray, we have to vibrate with all our strength of our hearts and minds, because in due time, peace will come. The collective and well, of course, in due time, but first we have the emergence of the shadow. So the collective shadow emerges from this shared unconscious also, because remember some previous meetings ago, when we turn our attention to ourselves, to our inner world, the first character that we are going to encounter is our shadow, aspects, okay? That are connected. Our shadow is connected with the collective shadow. So the collective shadow emerges from the shared unconscious, passed down through generations because of reincarnation also, right? And between groups, potentially leading to social calamities. We learn to distinguish between good and evil based on our culture and ethics, highlighting the importance of addressing the shadow from childhood. So Joanna is going to say that in these experiences of joy as well as sorrow, harmony as well as disorder, social groups can share them due to the collective unconscious, which explains disasters or fortunate occurrences that happening simultaneously in different parts of Earth. It is thanks to this behavior that at any given time, she says, the collective shadow emerges from the collective unconscious, transforming into social calamity. One learns to discern what is good and what is bad according to the culture and ethics of each group. Okay? And she says if the issue of the shadow were identified from childhood, when children would be taught to discover the impulses that arise from it, allowing the student to understand their own fragility, errors, to apologize and correct themselves, clarifying that there are always variations in behavior, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, favorable behaviors towards society and all that is connected to it would become easier. Okay? So she says the collective unconscious has recorded the entire process of the evolution, as we see here, of being since the cerebral cortex developed, giving rise to the emergence of exterior functions, abstract knowledge, transcendent values like love and mercy, forgiveness and charity, joy and compassion, unveiling the self. The opposing energies fostered the emergence of the shadow, which, due to its opposite side, forgets gratitude. We still are, dealing at this dimension with opposites, okay? So when the shadow emerges, the shadow makes us forget gratitude, creating obstacles to experiencing it due to the ancestral arrogance that comes from primitivism in the evolutionary scale. In a more careful analysis, one can ascertain that the evolution of human beings, says Joanna, is more the result of their minds than of their physical brains, which is equivalent to saying that the self preexists them, existing in dormancy while preparing the equipment to unveil itself. Okay? We have to understand that matter and psyche, as Jung says, are two aspects of the same unity, let's say, of the creation, right? So what happens in the mind, right, is going to reflect in the physical brain, but comes first, according to Joanna, not after. So Joanna is saying, of course, we know that here, but unfortunately, a lot of scientists still are looking for how the brain produces the mind, okay, produces consciousness. So Joanna say, in a more careful analysis, one can ascertain that evolution of human beings is more the result of the mind. So what does that mean? Unveiling the self, right? The conquest of individuation, people, where ethical impulses and enlightening achievements transcend physical capacity. So she says gratitude is a moral experience, not a cerebral one. It's a moral experience of the self, not of the ego. Since the former, the self, is of divine origin, and the later of human nature, Feelings are inherited, egoic feelings, generators of the shadow. Okay, we know that the shadow comes from our experience of the ego, as well as, so we inherit the shadow and egoic feelings, but we inherit sublime ones, which foster the self. So when one hates someone, the shadow experiences the suspicion that the other hates them and wishes to harm them. In a defense mechanism that we know, we are talking about projection, animosity is then born. When love is expressed, the cortex provides organic well being, expanding the possibilities for growth of the self, leading to health. Okay? And I can tell you that that psychiatrists are getting to this point to understand this mechanism. Oops, I have to pay attention to time. So let's go. So the power of love. Love is essential for expressing gratitude and experiencing life fully. When embraced, it influences future generations by imprinting itself on the collective unconscious, weakening the shadow's dominance. The ripple effect of love and gratitude can transform the collective unconscious and pave the way for a more positive future. As individuals awaken their self, they perceive the world with newfound clarity and appreciation, experiencing beauty and harmony previously unseen. So it's very important. We are talking about the transformation through self-awareness. And we know by result of research in psychiatry field that self-awareness is the most important aspect for well-being, okay? And Joanna is saying that much earlier than our research. Our research that are saying this is, they are very, from the past few years, right? So we are saying that sensory behavior that dominate, when it dominates, we are dominated by darkness and negativity. We're not talking about sensorial behavior, sorry. And when we awaken the self, we have experiences a world of light, beauty, and harmony. So overcoming the shadow is of utmost importance. Overcoming the shadow requires courage, Joanna says, and acknowledging its influence on our conflicts, such as guilt, shame, judgment, and separation. Recognizing our shared human fallibility is crucial for growth, avoiding self-judgment, and embracing the learning process through successes and failures. We must strive for self-awareness, Joanna says, and detach from negative self-perception and judgments of others, focusing on emotional growth. And she asks us to rebuild our emotional equipment, letting go of projections, embracing our higher sentiments, and paying attention to develop the value of unpleasant experiences. And the danger of projection, of course, we have been seeing it's paranoia, for instance, is typical disease of or a conflict, a neurotic conflict of projection, because the habit of projection can lead to paranoia, masking deep-seated anxiety. It's not enough to simply desire good, we must actively live it. Similarly, seeking peace requires embracing it internally rather than fighting against war. Okay, if we want peace in the world, we have to start with peace, inner peace, working in peace within ourselves. Combating external negativity often reflects internal struggles, Joanna says, because we project our own shadows onto others. And she talks about unmasking the shadow, as we have seen, acknowledging negativity, embracing our humanity, Compassion as gratitude, she asks us to understand. Compassion as a form of gratitude that benefits both the giver and the receiver. And self-acceptance, this process that involves recognizing and the ongoing journey of growth and transformation. And she says, confronting our inner adversaries, identifying our inner conflicts, right? And addressing them in because they are our conflicts, our inner adversaries, not people, in the outside world, so that we can free ourselves from their influence, the influence of our conflicts, and thus reclaim our humanity, right? Being true to ourselves. And this is a small summary in short, but I want to leave some time for questions. So I just show here the slides, then you can, when you go back to listen to this meeting, you can go back to the summary, okay? The cycle of the shadow, breaking the cycle that we have been talking about, self-awareness, compassion and acceptance, embracing gratitude, the importance of self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-development, okay? And the transformative power of gratitude that we have been talking in previous meetings. I just want to leave it here so you can stop the presentation when we are seeing it again and just see what's written. And remember, we have seen some practical steps to cultivate gratitude. Keep a journal, express gratitude to others, notice the good in every situation. And the journal of self-discovery that we are doing right now, right? It's all summed up here. And finally, embracing the light, that it's inner peace and connectedness. I'll just leave here for 1 second so you can stop. And in a synchronicity, I have to tell you, it's the last 3 slides, that this book just, suddenly appeared. I thought it was lost in the flood because I asked in Amazon and never came. And just like a week ago, it suddenly came. And the flood was in the beginning of this year, in May and June. So I thought it was a synchronicity that I had to write to you, because in the previous slide she said about embracing, she talks about embracing the light. And the book, it's in Portuguese, but I translated a little, the preface. She's talking about enlighten yourself is the title in Portuguese. And why is all of that so important? It's for our own development and well-being, but also because you know now that we are all interconnected, psychologically speaking, through the collective unconscious. So remember, let's put together the spirit, the force of the spirit within us, and that it's represented also in the collective unconscious because it's a transpersonal dimension of the psyche. And Joanna says that our self, capital S, is our spirit, right? So she says the mental radiation of each human individual expresses their evolutionary achievement, the stage of maturity or spiritual primitivism in which they find themselves. I'm sorry to say that people that are to this day promoting wars are still showing their spiritual primitivism, okay? And being an emanation, this mental radiation, being an emanation of energies sustained by thoughts and aspirations, moral behaviors and desires, it is made up of specific vibrations translating each person's reality. Now we are talking about the spirit. Joanna is talking about the spirit. and in a very precise way, energetic way, okay? We are co-creators. So what does that mean? While the ego can mask itself and present itself with values that the being does not really possess, these continuous waves are produced by legitimate ideations and real intimate desires. We cannot mask who we are in ourselves, capital S. That's why Jung called this dimension the objective psyche, as is there is what we really are. So, as a result of its permanent externalization, it produces resonance, influencing all those who are in its vibratory equivalence. It is necessary for contemporary human beings to understand the superior purpose of reincarnation, striving to achieve personal enlightenment, which expands into blessings of clarity and wisdom. Let's have more wisdom and clarity. So I'll just stop sharing so we can talk a little bit. Sorry, but it was a lot of ground to cover. So who wants to make some questions or, make some comments? We have some time. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you. I have so many questions, but I only make two. Um, First of all, when you were talking about the transference that to person because we share from the collective unconscious, um, does it mean that the two people it sort of transcends the personal and is because then it's from their past experience, maybe even with other people, not necessarily just that. It could, is that more or less what it meant?
Yes, let's think together because I thought a lot of things when I was reading again Joanne and all this stuff because she's asked us to put everything together, everything that we know about Jung and also about spiritist psychology. So when we are talking about archetypal transference, let's talk about that example that Mario brought in his book, okay? So, the young woman had a very bad, problematic mother complex, right? We don't know, Sylvia. And of course, if you are he didn't talk about that when he was presenting the case, but we don't know about her grandmother, what happened to the grandmother, why was the mother so domineering, right? This would, of course, had to be dealt with in an analysis session. But we can understand, and I was also thinking, Sylvia, about epigenetics, that we don't give exactly to our children conflicts in this sense, genetically speaking, but we give the information that it's going to be present in the next generations of, especially if we're talking about traumas, for instance, but also about spirituality and our force, our power to face problems. So we know that then the way that the genes manifest will going to be different. The way they express themselves, not the themselves, but the expression of the gene. So that's epigenetics, right? So if we think that we had different levels, of course, we can be talking about, for instance, if the woman, the young woman had a depression or anxiety, of course, a domineering mother is also a mother that we can think that she has at least anxiety in a clinical sense, because why does she have to try to dominate everyone around her, right? If I am okay with myself, I leave people be the way they are. I don't have to dominate to control everyone. If I have to dominate and control everyone, is because I'm projecting already personal aspects, and especially, for instance, let's think together. If I have a girl, a daughter, let's pay attention, because I was a daughter of someone in my past, my psychological past, my childhood, and I was a little girl. So of course, if I'm not paying attention, I'm going to project onto my daughter a lot of stuff. And usually, let's not throw the first stone, right? We all project things. I'm sorry to tell everyone, but that's our reality. And the problem is not even that. The problem is not being conscious, right? And trying to avoid to pay attention when I'm doing something, because remember, Jung says that our self, capital S, is always there. So we have a consciousness that otherwise, we wouldn't suffer from anxiety, from depression, and a lot of stuff. If I'm okay with ego self access, right? If my ego is okay with the self, with the purpose of the self, I'm not going to have any symptoms. Symptoms appear and conflicts, inner conflicts appear when I'm doing what the self, capital S, and I'm not paying attention at least, or I'm denying the call from within, right? So, given that, thinking together about your question, Sylvia, and please tell me if I'm just amplifying too much. But the thing that I was thinking is that the transference onto the analyst, right, was of course going to happen because the mother complex, and especially was, let's say, together with the animals, because everything is interconnected, even the complexes, archetypes like the neurons, everything is interconnected within ourselves. That's the way we work, this biologically and psychologically and spiritually. So what's going to happen is that, of course, this projection is going to appear in transference with the analyst as it happened. But the thing is that on the core of the this young lady's problem is it was the divine child, all the strength of the divine child was stuck, and was not liberated to psychological growth. So what happens is that it's going to appear in real life, in our relationships, because I can project in my boss, for instance. Let's say if the girl was not in analysis, she would project in other people, a teacher, a professor, whatever, someone that would have this more or less the same emotion, would arise the same emotion. And of course, then you can say that the mother like projected, and it was with the daughter, okay, that projection she internalized, and it's going to appear in the world. So what happens also, if we think in the spirit, because you talked about the collective unconscious, if I get stuck with this kind of pain, because the young lady was suffering a lot, right? You can see it through the image of her dream, the cutting arteries, like it's the way the blood flows through our body is the life of the body, and in a metaphor, the life of the spirit. So, okay, she was suffering a lot, you know, and then if she's suffering, she, of course, in the collective unconscious, everyone that it's in resonance with this kind of suffering, with the feeling disempowered, feeling hurt, feeling unloved by their mother. This is awful because we all expect it's archetypal. We say the Holy Mother. She loves all of us, right? Because we are all her children. And that's mean unconditional love. So we expect unconsciously from our mothers, especially our mothers, of course, from the father too, but because we come from within the mother, it's we have this knowledge that inside our collective unconscious that the mother has to love, has to have unconditional love. So when the mother is narcissistic as that mother, then she's not able to love, to have unconditional love. She will love, but in a neurotic way, in her own way, because she's stuck. She's also stuck with her inner child and with her own traumas. So what happens is that we have a resonance. I think that's why Freud, if we thinking about now with you, Silvia, I think that's why Freud said everything. It's all the mothers are guilt of something, in a sense, Oedipal complex and thing, because it's like, okay, mother has to love, but mother is a human being with traumas, with and also a spirit learning how to love. So, and we are children, but if we bring together the concept of reincarnation that is in our collective unconscious, reincarnation is an archetype. Our spirits know that it's a behavior of the spirit at this point of evolution or a need of the spirit. So everything the what makes us ill in the spirit and what's bring us health, it's there. It's our path for individuation. So, and also the last thing is in the vibrational that Joanna says in the end of our spirit, the way we each of us vibrate, the information. This is quantum physics. The information that we are sending through the collective unconscious, we can say, because we are using Jung perspective, but we could say in quantum physics, we are sending information to the collective because we are all interconnected. So I don't know if I answered your question, but heal
Yes.
ourselves and we heal the world.
There is more things to think about. But just very briefly, I'm sorry, everyone else. Um, going back to the same example of the girl, it was considered, although it was a rebellion for her not having read the book, it was a health assertion of independence, but she was addicted in a way to being doing something rebellious and then having to ask forgiveness. And I was just thinking in terms of the therapist, would he say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to forgive you for not reading the book, even though you think that was healthy, because otherwise, wouldn't she go back again to the same cycle that, oh, I did something rebellious, but now I need forgiveness? I was just thinking in terms of the therapist. I mean, of course, not openly, because I'm not going to forgive you, but otherwise, the therapist would, the transference and everything would become with the therapist. Oh, I did something rebellious and I want your forgiveness. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, no, you are very clear. But the thing is that if the therapist would say, well, you should have read the book, he was actually doing what the neurotic part of the unconscious wanted. He was repeating the trauma, let's say. You are being rebellious and you are not doing what I asked you to do. Because I think this young woman, of course, from the point of view of the mother, she learned that she had to do what the mother wanted, because then she would be loved and she would be someone. Because the mother is the first person to recognize that the baby is someone, is another, because she has to interpret the way that the babe, for instance, screams to see if she has to change a diaper or breastfeed, right? And so she's going to do something, and then she's going to start connecting with the baby and giving a sense of self for the baby. Because then she's saying, the baby starts recognizing that the way it screams or you know uh, has a response that comes from outside of it. This is the we have seen in the previous meetings, is the birth of the consciousness of the ego consciousness, right? Here. So the girl needed, all of us need, when we are children, the mother to recognize our needs, our the way that we are, to say, oh, you are, of course, when the we say, we tell the baby, oh, or the toddler and all, oh, this drawing so beautiful, how beautiful you, I love this and that, or you are so cute, or, and even with talking another, oh, what a nice baby, this and that. So the baby starts saying, oh, I'm a nice I'm a nice person, let's say. It's not rational, but of course, it's the way it feels. But Sylvia, you see, it was a neurotic repetition. The rebellion was very healthy because it was coming from a part within herself that saying, no, this is not love. Real love. Let's talk about the archetype, because the self know what's the real love. And Jung says that the self is present from birth, even if the ego is not, right? So real love is not doing what other people expect from us. Real love is love thyself as thy neighbor. So I have to love myself with all my flaws, all my difficulties, all my shadows, right? Respect them, of course, not submit to them, but understand them, integrate them, and recognize in myself what it's my abilities, my values, my spiritual values that I have already have. So if my mother doesn't recognize, we are all learning with each other. If I learn, and if I grow and learn that, okay, my mother cannot recognize, but I recognize myself, I value myself, I can say now that this is the way that I'm feeling. So then, of course, I will start loving myself, and I will still love my mother even better, for instance, because then I understand that she also has, for instance, traumas and problems as me. So I give my mother, my father, the right to be what they are. We are talking only about the father, mother, and child complex, but just for thinking as what you said. So I think the therapist, if he wants to give a different perspective, because if he says, yes, you should have read, then he was giving the same perspective as the mother. But if he says, he said, he didn't say if she should or not, but he pointed out, and I think he did right, this was your rebellion. Because then he was being a nice, let's say, a nice mother. He was correcting the posture, said, okay, this is rebellion. Okay. And she recognized, she could tell him and he could tell her. So it's here in the room. Okay. But then he said, what I think it was great, and this is a very positive aspect of you, of yourself. It's healthy, because it was the mother would say that was neurotic, because the mother needed that, if we think a little bit deeper, to feel good, to feel that she was forgiving. Why did she have to feel good forgiving the rebellion of that was a problem of the mother, right? So if the girls would stuck in that thing, I have, because I need love and I have to ask for forgiveness and my rebellion is bad, she would always submit to the mother, to the neuroses of the mother, and she would never learn how to love better. I don't know if I answered you, but
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes,
I
yes.
think he
Yes,
did
and the hard
right.
time.
I think he
Yeah.
did right. Thank you,
Yes.
Sylvia.
Thank
Tanya,
you. Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you very
Hi,
much
Tanya.
for all that you've passed on. Just uh, three questions, but I'll prioritize because I'm conscious of time. Does it exclusively have to be the mother, or can it not be another responsive, loving caregiver? Because I'm thinking of like Bowlby, that as long as there's a secure attachment towards somebody, that then there's hope for the future in terms of.
Yeah, it can be, and also a responsible person who has an attachment with this kind of emotion, Tanya. So it doesn't have to be a mother or father, but a representative, if you could say,
Oh, so
in
they represent
psychological
another
sense.
archetype. So it could even be, it can be a man, but who is taking on that caring, that was effectively providing the maternal, yeah.
Yeah, in psychological terms, it's not so much of external way of being biological even way, but a psychological attitude. So what matters is who represents the mother for the child. You
Mm.
know, I think that's your question,
Yes.
right?
No, no, that, yeah, because I can think of a couple of examples of fathers who fulfill that in a way that I think was admirable. That's been very, yeah, very impressive to see. And then if Freud, in terms of transference, always saw it as pathological, which in my mind I thought can the transference perhaps could be positive, where, for example, if you have the natural expectation that most people are friendly and warm and decent, and that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you go out expecting people to be like that. You go out being warm, friendly, open, and kind, and then you kind of, it's more likely to come back to you because that's what you're giving out. Do you know what I mean? That it's almost like, I guess
Oh,
it's a form of projection, maybe more than transference. But if you've always experienced that in your upbringing, and then you go out into the world and you almost go in this bubble of expecting people to be nice, and and then people meet you and they're disarmed because they meet this warm, friendly, you know, individual.
that's the ideal. We were talking what Joanna says that we should all do. That's the ideal, to act because if you feel this way, and if you try working with your shadow, the problem, Tanya, is that remember projection is a mechanism of defense of the ego. But why we have to defend ourselves? We only have to defend ourselves because of shadow aspects and inner conflicts. When we don't have this, or in the future, let's say, because we are struggling as humanity to work with our shadows, people that are awakened, we say that, like, like we hear, like people in different parts of the globe that are thinking about this kind of issues. We call them spiritually awakened or awakening. So when we are doing like that, and that's why we need a mature ego, with courage to face difficulties, because it's not from the outside world, it's from the inner world. And it's from because it's a mechanism of defense projection. So when I don't have to defend myself anymore, even if it's something that it's upsetting myself, but if I have self-compassion, for instance, that we're seeing, and I say, okay, I can be feeling that. I don't have to be right all the time, I can be, feeling jealousy or envy. It's a human, it's still in our human nature. But if I acknowledge that within myself, I'm not going to project onto others. I'm not going to have to defend myself. And I can be in the world, as you said, Tanya, in a more serene way, because I will have peace within myself, not because I'm flawless, not because I'm perfect, but because I can be with myself. And because I can endure whatever I see in myself. And then I can give my brothers and sisters the same right, because Jung says, I can only, cope with other people's shadows if I cope with my shadow first, because then I'll be compassionate with others. I say, okay, there's nothing to do with me. For instance, if I go in the world, as you said, and I told you all guys that I have like a Pollyanna complex. So always seeing the bright side. And many times I said, wow, I thought this person liked me so much, or was, so friendly, or I was, wow, with the person or with the project that we had or whatever. But the Pollyanna complex, we are still in a duality, right? I want to see the world better, and it's me also. But the counterpart is, oh, I don't like the shadow because I have to change the shadow. But it could be in the unconscious, and many times in my life it was in the unconscious, and many times yet maybe it was in that. Well, now that I'm older, I can say that when I'm usually feeling bad or whatever, and I'm trying to see the bright side, and sometimes it comes in a difficult some days, or some I can endure it because I know, well, not always I will be able, I'm not so evolved or whatever. We are not in this point. So spiritually evolved that I'm not going to be hurt by what someone does to me or for whatever reason. But I can stay with my hurt, and I can pay attention from where this hurt is coming. And then, of course, I'm going to see something that was in my unconscious, or something that, even, some anger. Why do we still have to have shadow and wars and like that? But then when I do that, I'm judging. What Joanna tells us not to do. Don't judge in this sense, just discriminate. This is bad, this is not, this is okay, this is not for me, or I can see the suffering in my brother or sister, but I shouldn't say, oh, you are doing a bad thing, this and that, judge in this sense, because who doesn't have to deal with shadow issues, right? I don't know if I answered you, but we would like to be in the world, as you said, and many times we can be. I hope in the Congress next year we are just going to hug and be just like Tanya said. But sometimes, even when we were thinking together or whatever, or even there in the event, I can look. Oh, Tanya gave a hug in Sylvia, and she never gave me a hug. For instance, if we're and then Anahy, this is a shadow problem. Maybe Tanya hasn't even seen you. Why am I being paranoid? Just to give a simple example of being in life, being with people that we like, that we have been together studying, and we develop some kind of affection or emotion, let's say, towards one another, and expectations. But sometimes we are going to see each other or in different moments and not feel so good. It doesn't, or feel strange, or say think something of the person. It doesn't mean that the person it's not has something towards myself. Probably in the first moment that you look at it, it means that something inside of yourself, or some shadow aspect presented itself. So before, what Joanna asks us, before judging other, let's first look at ourselves to see what's going on. It changes totally the way that we perceive and understand the world and our brothers and sisters. We have to struggle and have this courage, but we will get there, I'm quite sure. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
big topic. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a big topic. Let's keep all this in mind to talk together because the theme of the Congress will be emotions, feelings, and thoughts, something like that. I don't want to give you spoilers, but um, Lolita wants to talk, or anybody else? No? Are you okay? So thank you so much, Tanya and Sylvia. We have two more meetings. Lindalva wants to say something, no?
Um,
No?
Hi, Anahy. I was
Hi.
I was just on today's information you brought us, reflecting about the self-healing that it's very easy for us to like to see others like the doctors who are there to help us as the source of our healing rather than a helper. So I was just wondering, in this process of finding that we are the ones who need to find within ourselves the the strength to also to change what is to find the balance to what is not right. Um, how do we sort of make or help the patient or the person who we are talking to, not even in a relationship of doctor patient, in a sort of different situation of friendship or family situations? How do we make or help the other person to realize that it is us who need to make that process of change, especially in the cases of mothers who we are mothers, as you have mentioned, we who are mothers, we also have our wounds, we have our problems that we bring from the past, but everyone seems to want to have had a perfect mother. And I find this sometimes in conversations so difficult when people are always sort of criticizing their mothers, their role models. Oh, they should have been like these and they should have been like that. When we are, as you said, we are just human beings as well in evolution. We are not perfect, and that is why it's hard for us as mother to be perfect because we don't know yet what perfection is. We only know what we know right now. So this is my sometimes my difficulties. When do we sort of help the other to find out that we have the mothers that we needed or that were possible to have, and that whatever is not we are not happy with, we need to find ourselves the source for healing those wounds.
Oh, it's a big question. Yeah, it's a huge question, actually. But I can tell you from everything that we talked today and previously in other meetings. Um, let's say, I think you asked two questions in one, let's say, right? The self-healing capacity, abilities that all of us have, and the mother-child relationship as a path or to this learning of self-healing, right? Or to have this learning, but also sometimes to make it harder if the mother doesn't acknowledge that the child has, as all of us, is a human being, is a soul, a spirit that is here, reincarnated, and has its own history and going somewhere, its own personal myth, right? So I think so it's two and even more questions in one. It's very big. But
Sorry.
just No problem. It's just
Yeah.
we were going to be together, hopefully in some months, so we are going to be talking a lot. But just to talk a little bit about that, uh, I think it's first of all, we in Spiritist knowledge, we know that we are in the moment. We can be mother or father of this and that person, spirit, and we love them dearly. But how many daughters and sons, how many fathers and mothers have we had? How many lives have we lived? Why do, here the ego is always saying mine, my daughter, my son, my mother, my father. So it's all about the ego and the needs and the way the ego relates to the world. So I think what Joanna and other authors are asking us to use all the knowledge and the study that we have been doing, with that supposedly we are more awakened than other people that are very materialistic, to use it now in our relationships with ourselves and with others. So if as a mother, there are some people from the medical field, when I was training to be a psychiatrist, saying, because my training was very Freudian in the beginning as a psychiatrist in residency, and people would say, it's all you're guilty, girls, even if you are not mother yet. It's always going to be, your fault anyway. So don't try to ask many more questions, because like you are doomed, you are going to make mistakes. And this is so heavy. And even, for instance, if I'm a man, or if as Tanya was asking, probably she remember other relationships. We have so many homosexual couples, for instance, so many different ways that people nowadays make a family, and they want to have children and adopt and all of that. So it's not so much as oh, this person is my mother and she has to love me. The child's going to, it's archetypal, and it's, in our collective unconscious. But if we put together the spiritist knowledge, and especially people, if we teach our children, we forget to teach the children, all this, because Joanna is saying, I put some slides about that. If we could teach, of course, in the language that the child can understand from early age, that it's okay. It's not that I have to say, oh, you were, mad with your brother because you were jealous of him. So you are a bad child because you are jealous. No, it's okay, but mother loves you all, and it's okay to be jealous, but not acting jealousy, not go there and hit your brother, for instance, right? So I'm just giving you a simple example that we need to teach our children, and of course, I wouldn't say even teach our children, because the children that are arriving on Earth in this transitions time, we have even the Walden and a lot of other mediums around the globe say they are spiritually more evolved than us, that are here in the moment. But they need instruction and guidance, because they need education of the ego. So it doesn't say, oh, you're so evolved and you can do whatever, you are going to be spoiled because you're so smart, you can do whatever you want. No, so I think education is more like helping them to remember that love is for all of us, and that if we still have shadow aspects, the ego can have, even if you are a spirit that has some more knowledge than others, you are going to experience this body, this material life, this ego with problems and all of that. But but you can deal with it. And mother can help, or father can help you. but not always, because sometimes they're not going to be able. I have a lot of cases that come to my mind. For instance, a few days ago, a person was telling me, "Oh, I screamed in front of my child," and this person is a spiritist. And I said, "How could I do that? Because I read so much, blah, blah, blah." Of course, she didn't hit the child, but she screamed and she was angry. And then she paid attention to herself and said, "Okay, it was not okay, but I can talk to my child and say, well, mother was not right. It was not okay. Do that. But, sometimes adults do things that are not okay. So I think we have to be compassionate with ourselves, fathers and mothers, whatever combination. But if we are acting as someone, mother, or someone, father, and integrating the knowledge, I think that's the key point, that we are spirits living in duality and in a still very difficult for us experience to be in the body with a psyche, with an ego. And it's okay. We are going to make mistakes, as Joanna says, and we can tell them we made them mistakes, to ourselves, to others, ask for or forgive me, please, but not in a neurotic way as the girl, not projecting, not defending ourselves. If I don't have to defend myself, doesn't matter the error that I have made. But if I can tell my friend, my family member that I'm sorry, I was wrong, um, please forgive me. I'm doing an act of love because I'm recognizing a love towards myself. I'm recognizing that I was wrong. I had a miscalculation, a shadow problem, whatever, conflict. And I'm telling this person that she or he is very important to me. And I would always like to do this with anyone, not only somebody that I know and that I love, even people that I don't know so much, even people that I don't. And that's why I think we have to try to be truthful to ourselves and always very truthful to others, towards others. If we do that, we are going to be okay. I don't know if I answered you. We can talk more later.
Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully, I hope to see you all if possible
Yes,
in
thank you,
person.
Anahy.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, all of you that stayed here. I know it's only once a month, so sometimes we go ahead in the time. Okay. And have a great month, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.